In my work, I call this the 90-10 phenomenon. I believe too many people put 90% of their bandwidth and psychological energy into the most toxic and egocentric relationships in their lives, and only put 10% of their bandwidth into the healthy relationships. Have you ever encountered this? Have you ever said, like, God, all I told them was good news, and they blew up on me? Why? Because one of the things you should not be saying to a narcissist is good news. You're like, say what? Yeah, good news. And this could be any kind of good news. I got a promotion. I got a raise. I got an award. I won a prize. My friends are taking me away for a special weekend. My birthday is next week. Any kind of good news. And you think, what could go wrong? This isn't criticism. This isn't feedback. This isn't even about them. Why can't I share good news? Because in a narcissistic person, it activates that inadequacy, insecurity, jealousy, and envy that are all massive triggers and bringers of shame in narcissistic people. This pattern of getting raged at, or getting passive-aggressive stuff, or the silent treatment, or contempt for just telling them something good is actually what really confuses people in these relationships. For some of you, this was a pattern that was manifested even in childhood, when a narcissistic, neglectful, or egocentric parent would not take notice of your good news. They would minimize it, or not listen to it, or contemptuously dismiss it. Say things to you like, okay, big shot, and okay, let's just go see if you could win that again. Maybe that was just a lucky one-time thing. Or they might say to you, ugh, come on, these awards, whatever this nonsense is, it only matters if you can make some money at it. Or, doesn't every kid in your school get a trophy these days? These are the same parents that in childhood and then in adulthood, people often feel compelled to please over and over again. But no matter what you do or how you are recognized, they don't care. And that's not because you aren't enough. You are. It's because the people who are narcissistic are empty and egocentric, in this case, your parents. A narcissistic parent is unable to understand that everything isn't about them, and that your award was a moment of joy for you, and that a parent is supposed to be unconditionally about their kids. And even if you are 45 years old, you'll see, you're still getting awards and accolades, those parents won't care any more than they cared about that award you got when you were 5 years old. Sadly, this pattern can then trail people into adulthood when they have narcissistic partners, friends, or workplaces. Same drill. Let's say then you tell your narcissistic partner something great that happened to you, or just something good that happened to you. And you'll see your narcissistic partner will either get grumpy or passive-aggressive, or find a way, quietly or loudly, to punish you. And what's so tragic about that is that you are happy and proud of your good news, and you tell whom you believe should be the first person who would want to know. And maybe at some deep level you think, oh, I'm going to tell my partner like this. Other people think I'm great, so this will finally get their attention and validation. No, there's no magic way to get the narcissist to notice you. Rather, your good news ends up activating their inadequacy and their shame, and takes all of the wind out of your sails. And as I said, it sort of spoils the good news for you. After your partner's contempt and tantrum, you may not feel compelled to share your good news with anybody else. And that's sort of sad, right? One thing that can often happen with narcissistic people when you share good news with them is that they'll meet it, or respond to your good news with a cruel, minimizing, and mocking contempt. For example, you might say, hey, I got an award at work, and they give it out only one time a year, and there's going to be an award ceremony in a few weeks. The narcissistic person will respond with stuff like, ugh, that ceremony's when there's traffic. That's really inconvenient. Or, wow, all this award stuff matters to you. Why do you need to be the center of attention? Oh, God, your whole life is, look at me. Everyone celebrate me. And then you expect me to sit in traffic and then eat some rubber chicken dinner so you can get some plaque worth $10? Honestly, when you really, finally, actually, really make it in a real job, maybe you won't need all that attention. Maybe you need all these plaques. And then you may give them the date. Maybe you're foolish enough to give them the date of the event, and then they'll either cancel at the last minute or tell you that they can't make it, or they'll come and maybe be grumpy the whole time. But you getting all the attention for a whole evening, that's just too much for them to bear. And your heart will break because that's that. You're proud because you know those things aren't true about you. You're proud. You did good work. It got recognized. But with those words, the entire experience can get cheapened, especially if you don't fully understand narcissism, but at this point you better. They may not be that obvious, though, in their contempt. I'm giving you sort of a dramatic example. They may do more of a subtle passive-aggressive approach. You tell them about the award, and then you get back, okay, great. So on top of my existing bad day, now I have to hear how great your day is. Listen, I can't be bothered with going out to dinner tonight and celebrate. I have a deadline. Or you might get like a, whoop-de-doo, I can't get a break, can I? And then they will stay on that sad sack victimized rant for a while. And that's going to have the same effect on you as them directly insulting you. And despite your pride and happiness about your award, you may hold back and just stop talking about it. Then it may extend to you not wanting to share the news with anyone anymore because it felt so bad to share it with this one person. A piece of advice I have given to people for many years, and that appears repeatedly in my books and seminars, is when you get a piece of good news in your life, you need to tell everyone who has your back, all the good people in your life first. Your good friends, any family members you have that may be good and kind, anyone who will be happy for you. Start there. Drink up their joy and happiness and celebration and be happy with them. And then, at some point, after you've had that experience, if you have to tell, you tell the narcissist or not. I actually remember having an experience of this in the last year or two. I had developed and done something kind of neat, and I'd gotten some really great feedback on it. And I was in the presence of an invalidating person in my life. But then a really sweet, kind person in my life, a third party in this conversation, was an old friend and heard about my new thing and said, hey, I want to see pictures of this new thing. I'm so excited. And she had heard about it from someone else. So I pulled out my phone and I shared the picture, and the really sweet, kind friend got so excited. She's like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful, Ramani. I'm so proud of you. She gave me a big hug. It was very sweet. And it felt so nice because this person is so kind, so genuine, and I was actually proud of it. What was very interesting was the invalidating person in my life, who's actually pretty close to me, said, why didn't you tell me about this? Why didn't you show me? The invalidating person was actually getting a little defensive as to why they had not been included ahead of time. Why didn't they know about this? Why are they just finding about it now? And I didn't tell that invalidating person originally because I knew they would have said something snarky or minimized it, and that would have hurt me, so there was no point. I just shrugged and I said, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But interestingly, the invalidating person then became sulky for the rest of the night. No doubt that sense of shame they were then feeling about not being in the know. You can't win with a narcissist, but I felt better. Because I was unsure about this new thing I had done. And I knew that the narcissist would have not been encouraging. And it really felt good to have that really sweet friend be so happy. I knew the narcissistic person was going to get sulky either way, and this way I protected myself, and I didn't have to go through the hurtful experience of their indifference. It was ironic they happened to be at the situation where this other person was. Had they not, they never would have found out. Sharing good news is a very easy trap to fall into with narcissists. Sometimes you can't get around it. Your good news may become public, and so they may learn it. And then they may get angry that they learned it off of social media or some other public source and not from you directly. If that happens, you could play with it a little bit and say, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I don't want to talk about these things that happened to me. But keep in mind that's not going to work if it's you sharing it on social media. The narcissistic people often almost feel angry that they don't get to be the ones to hear it first because they feel entitled to everything in your life and then comment on it. Their entitlement is such that they feel entitled to knowing everything and trashing it or accepting it as they see fit. It's an interesting form of baiting. However, that anger that you're ultimately going to get from them anyhow is maybe worth it to get positive feedback from healthy people before the narcissist rains on your parade, because the narcissist always rains on your parade. Shame activation is such a universal experience for narcissistic people, and everything seems to bring it up, both the good news and bad news. So I would say this: think twice before you ask them to be the one to accompany you to any event where you are the focus, whether that's a birthday party, an award ceremony, or other fete or party or something where people will be honoring you in some way. Or at a minimum, may I suggest, take 2 cars. I have seen this happen so many times. The healthy person is, being honored or celebrated. The narcissist goes along and will either drink too much or claim to be sick or exhausted or have a headache or be bored or just get sullen and sulky in the corner, and you will feel compelled to get them out of there or leave with them, and there will be only 1 car. Think ahead and recognize that I can almost guarantee that they will ruin your night. Ideally, they don't come in the first place, but if that is unavoidable, always make sure you have a plan B in place. Sometimes the only way to get ahead of this is the workarounds. Your good news is their shame activator. So make sure you share it with those who are worthy and make it an afterthought for the narcissistic people in your life. You will not be sorry you do this. Stop like a little child running to the narcissist with the good news thinking this is what's going to win them over. It's not. They're probably going to get angry, and you lose that precious opportunity to just be with something good. Be with it good first, and just like my experience where the invalidating person's like, oh, why didn't I know about this? You can then play it off, but have those moments of joy first. So much joy gets robbed from these relationships in the first place. You do need to be strategic in how you present stuff to them and recognize you can't forever be in that role of the 6-year-old child who's waiting for a mother or a father to praise their drawing. If it didn't happen then, it ain't going to happen now. And if you have a narcissistic adult in your life, it's going to be exactly the same thing. They do not like watching anybody else's parade. Remember that. These are the enablers who just think everyone is great. We need to give people a chance. I'm sure nobody ever means to be mean, and I like to think of the best of everyone. Those kinds of enablers. These enablers are what we can call the immature and childish Pollyannas. This is more than just not getting it. This is denial with fiction on top. These are interesting people because it's not as though that they are so immature or childish that they are not in adult roles and adult jobs. These are people who are sometimes bosses at work and administrators at schools and people who work with the legal profession and people who have influence over others, but are just those Pollyanna type, I just like to think the best of everyone types of people. Remember, Pollyanna is that childhood story character who just saw the best in everyone. Now, this is dangerous because it goes beyond just not knowing it. The people who are just plain ignorant or uninformed about narcissism, there's still the possibility that you might be able to educate them or open their eyes. The Pollyanna type folks like to put their fingers into their ears and say, la la la, do not puncture my view of everyone being nice and finding a way that I can soften their bad behavior so I can live in a world full of unicorns and butterflies. Now, there is something so appealing about living in a world where everyone is good, or you have the privilege of assuming that, and can maintain an equitable, loving, fair, just version of the world. I'd love to live in that world, or at least get tickets to be in that world for a day. The Pollyannas are the ones who magnify the sense of cognitive dissonance that so many people struggle with, that make justifying the narcissist's bad behavior so much easier, that leave us questioning and blaming ourselves. Like, damn, I really am a bad person if I view this person so badly, or I use bad words like narcissism, because this other person sees so much goodness in them. What is wrong with me? I'm a monster. In fact, I have seen the Pollyanna enablers be the reason that people stay in these relationships for years, even decades longer. There is a real shame that can be caused by Pollyanna types saying how there is so much misunderstood love and light inside the narcissist, and how that they themselves like to see the good in everyone. And here you are looking up videos on narcissism and psychopathy and arrogance. And what is so sad is that most survivors of narcissistic abuse will write themselves off as the ones who are monstrous, rather than seeing the Pollyanna's view as dangerous, which frankly it is. Now, where this type of enabling is most dangerous is when this Pollyanna enabler person is in a decision-making position. This can include people at high levels of decision-making, including judge or other advocates in family court, human resource professionals, arbitrators or mediators, people who do hiring or vetting people for new jobs or positions, decision makers in an organization that make recommendations on terminations, advancements, and promotions. The Pollyannas in these positions are often responsible for naive, ill-informed decision-making on the basis of their rosy worldview that is not informed by how these relational patterns work, and will sign off on unhealthy or downright dangerous custody agreements, will give a harassing, predatory colleague endless second chances, will set up re-traumatizing mediation meetings between perpetrators and those that they have harmed in the name of bringing everyone together and kumbayaing the whole mess, merely enabling the narcissist to go out and do more harm. They may keep doing this until someone gets really harmed, for example, assaulted or killed, and then they'll wring their hands and say, "Oh goodness, I had no idea." Yes, you did have an idea. People were telling you. People were telling you how bad it was. And because you were behaving as the Pollyanna, as though you were at a theme park and are 6 and want to believe that you're in fantasy land, these Pollyanna enablers are more invested in their damn rosy worldview than they are in the realities of these antagonistic personality styles and the harm they do to other people. In the Pollyanna person's zeal to look for the love in the light in a narcissist, they effectively turn off everybody else's. And this gets most dangerous if the Pollyanna enabler is in the role of a mental health provider or a coach, someone that a person turns to, that they're vulnerable with, that they may talk about narcissistic abuse with. And then the person in the practitioner role makes it about, oh goodness, well, there is good in everyone. Maybe you aren't looking hard enough because you did tell me that they took out the trash last week. Well, that's something, huh? Let's just turn that frown upside down and see that it isn't all bad. Marriage is hard. Marriages are about compromise. Well, maybe their love language is different. Please don't get me started. This nonsense is gaslighting and invalidation, and in a therapy relationship, it's also dangerous because it can infuse a person going through something in a narcissistic relationship with self-blame and self-doubt. The person who's going through it will say, God, it's got to be me. Maybe I'm just not trying hard enough to find the goodness. It's not the job of a mental health practitioner or, frankly, a coach to be an unseeing, cheerful, naive cheerleader, but rather a theoretically and empirically driven reality check and intrapsychic tour guide, and certainly not a force in someone's life that plants doubt in a person. But compared to all of the other enabling types, the Pollyannas are the most powerful at leaving people doubting themselves. There is another form of enabler we'll be talking about in another video called the toxically positive enabler. I'll get to that. But this Pollyanna type of enabling is very societally supported. We just love the Jane Austen-esque characters who rather chirpily see the good in everyone. I have to say, as a girl myself, and then as I grew up, I desperately wanted to be this chirpy person. The chirpy, cheerful, everyone is good person. I have always, and still do, have a bit of a sour, cynical side. It's probably more than a side to me, which again, given how I grew up, makes 100% sense. And I actually want to give a shout out to that child in me that already knew to not to trust people too fast, and to be chronically suspicious. Given the elements of my own backstory, there was no way I could really ever get to Pollyanna. I grew up in too antagonistic system. Ironically, when I got into young adulthood, I wanted to be chirpy girl, so I tried to be the chirpy person for a minute, and I gave someone a chance, and I ended up getting stalked and harmed. I've never really tried to be chirpy again, and that was almost 40 years ago. People were and still are chirpy and cheerful and Pollyanna with me in my extended family, and they did and they do harm to me. I still doubt myself, and I study this shit. It chills me to think about how the chirpy Pollyanna enablers do so much damage to the people affected by the narcissist and get away with it, and in fact are even applauded for it because they're so eternally cheerful and on their chronic quest for love and light, even if it means invalidating or denying the experience of someone who's been mistreated. At this point in my life, if people want to call me a cold-hearted bitch, get in line. I'm fine with it, because let me tell you this, it beats the alternative. Pollyanna enablers are the patron saints of second, third, fourth, and fifth chances. And they're definitely the patron saints of the benefit of the doubt. They pull out all the cheerful rationalizations. Oh, come on now. They don't mean it. I like to see the good in others. I've seen some good there. Let's give it a chance. You never know, do you? Miracles can be found everywhere. And as you go on this grail quest for a miracle, your mental health is eroding, your sense of reality is fading, and you find it difficult to trust your basic instincts in basic situations. We waste so damn much time trying to find the good in the narcissists, psychopaths, and abusers of all kinds, that we spend no time trying to see the good in ourselves. The Pollyanna enablers, under their cheerful, chirpy facades, may strangely enough be the most dangerous. Their endless positivity and sunshine and second chances can belie dangerous rhetoric, enabling, gaslighting, and invalidation. Sadly, their sunshine and rainbows approach can be so seductive. Listen, nobody wants to sit next to a sour cynic, but everyone wants to be friends with a cheerful, chirpy, happy person. If I were you, next time you walk into a room, look for the empathic cynic. Less chirp, more reality. Please, oh please, do not let the Pollyanna enablers need to keep the world looking so shiny undermine your instincts or lead you to shame, blame, or gaslight yourself. And give yourself permission to engage in reality-based problem solving on how to manage or get out of one of these situations. And the answers on how to manage a narcissistic relationship are anything but cheerful. The Pollyannas hate it when you say, this is never going to get better. Oh, no, no, don't say that. There's always a silver lining. Trust me on this one. Don't look for a silver lining in a narcissistic relationship. Find it in yourself, find it in the healthy people, and also, as you're cleaning house on the narcissistic folks, you might want to give the Pollyanna enablers the heave-ho as well. Don't stake everything on one thing, lest it doesn't work out. It was originally a proverb found in Spanish and Italian, and then it showed up in Cervantes' Don Quixote in the mid-1600s in writing. So literally, if you put all your eggs in one basket, and then you drop the basket, then you're out of luck, no eggs. So what's the narcissism link here? There's actually a few. First, a narcissistic relationship is often about a person putting too much stock in that one relationship. And over time, as you invest more and more of yourself into the relationship, and you recognize how toxic the relationship is, with time you may feel there are few or no other options. If I had a buck for everyone who said to me, I have to stick this relationship out, I have already put so much time into it. This relationship is this is not a financial investment. It's your life. And in this way, a person starts putting all of their belief and stock into this one narcissistic relationship. So when the narcissistic relationship goes wrong, and it will go wrong, a person has already invested too much, because that's what narcissistic relationships require. Too much. People will look back and reflect on the fact that they sacrificed opportunities, perhaps education or career. They may have sacrificed other things like having a child, or having as many children as they wanted, or they gave in to having children, they didn't even want children. They may have sacrificed their voice, their authenticity, the things that they wanted from life to make this relationship work. Why? Because people in narcissistic relationships struggle. They always just want to be enough. Somewhere they believed, if I am just enough, and kept at it and put all of themselves into this relationship, and then all of those eggs are in that one basket called a narcissistic relationship, that ultimately falls. And then boom, the eggs are broken, and so too is your heart. A signature element of narcissistic relationships is isolation. Even the most grandiose, extroverted, hail fellow, well-met narcissist will isolate. They may have a robust social world and may not be the traditional cut you off from everyone controlling person like we might see, for example, in domestic violence. But what happens is narcissists speak so badly about everyone and criticize you and make it so unpleasant that social gatherings feel unpleasant, and you feel too ashamed to talk about your relationships because you don't understand what's happening to you and nobody else does either. Or a narcissist may take the traditional route of isolation. They complain when you see family or friends. They imply that you aren't into the relationship because you want to spend time with other people. They become jealous or suspicious or brooding and angry when you are having a nice time with other people. You know the drill. And so you will become more and more isolated, thinking that once they feel comfortable with you, then they will be good with your family and friends. But that doesn't ever seem to happen. Or narcissistic people will just be so malcontented, they speak badly about everyone, and you get so exhausted at defending not just the human race, but the people you care about, that you just give up. Or they are threatened by your work and collegial relationships, so you may socialize less with those folks too, and before you know it, all your eggs are in one basket. They've isolated you from everyone, and they become the only game in town. Once you recognize that it is not healthy, well, all of those damned eggs are in that one narcissistic basket, and you have cut out from your sources of social support and may not feel comfortable talking about this with other people, and many therapists may not get it, or you don't even feel comfortable talking about it in therapy, then, even with the recognition that this narcissistic relationship is not healthy, you feel powerless to change it. And you do find that you did put all your eggs in one basket. And now the basket has fallen and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, obviously, this can also happen with workplace narcissism, and you may give up other opportunities or go all in on a business partnership and bam. If it is a narcissistic situation, you may lose your investment, time, or intellectual property. Or if you work with a narcissist in a field where their reputation still holds credibility, you may not get an important recommendation or reference that you sorely need to get another job. The basket falls, the eggs break. In a family, it can again be about a controlling, narcissistic family member maybe suggesting that you go into a family investment together or move in with them, or something that makes you vulnerable, but you fall into it thinking that, hey, it's family. Family has each other's back, right? No, not when it is a narcissistic family system. And then when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, you will put all of yourself into your family, right? And then there's nothing left. This doesn't just link to the idea of money and resources within a family. Sometimes people will just stick with family because they're family and forego building relationships and collaborations and the like outside of the family because the family wants you around every weekend and every holiday and every Wednesday night and every this and every that. And if you violate those rules, then there's all kinds of rage and accusations about your commitment to your family and your loyalty. You put all of your eggs into the family basket, and if it's a narcissistic family, when you need them, they probably won't have your back. That recognition, that moment is utter devastation for people who buy into that family ideology of tight-knitted families and not see the control, narcissism, triangulation, and other toxic dynamics that may be afoot. The eggs and basket proverb really apply to many narcissistic relationship situations, especially those characterized by control. Because the narcissistic person wants to be in control. They sort of set up this one basket situation, as it were. And because so many people in any kind of narcissistic relationship have that ongoing impossible goal of wanting to win over the narcissist or be in their good graces or just want to make it work, will just keep piling those eggs into that one basket, saving very few eggs for the other important aspects of their life. In my work, I call this the 90-10 phenomenon. I believe too many people put 90% of their bandwidth and psychological energy into the most toxic and egocentric relationships in their lives, and only put 10% of their bandwidth into the healthy relationships, because the healthy people don't want to stress you out, and they're there for you unconditionally, and they appreciate you when you can come around, but they don't guilt you when you don't. Now flip that math. Gray rock and set boundaries around those toxic people. Only give them 10%. They're going to be disappointed in you no matter what. Put the 90% into the good people. You will find that you will be healthier, happier, better off, and more successful in this scenario. No, it will not be fun to deal with the narcissist rage, but by putting more into your healthier relationships, it's also going to give you more strength, fortitude, and support to believe you can push back. So take those precious eggs of yours and figure out who the worthy recipients in your life are. You should have lots of baskets in your life, and the lion's share of those eggs should go in the basket that's marked you. Your authenticity, your values, your true north. That basket is made of better stuff. And when you put it into you, you can then pay it forward into the important people, the healthy people, the authentic opportunities, and the meaningful work in your world. So this video was actually inspired by a show I was watching on a flight, and the show was about elite athletes. And it's a dangerous sport too. And they made sacrifices for the sport, and they were following different athletes in the show, right? And all the athletes had different families and different backstories, and they were all brilliant at their sport. In one of the storylines, and that storyline involved a large family, the patriarch of the family, who was the athlete, he was devoted to everyone in his family, and it's a large extended family he lived in the midst of. And he saw their potential and he cultivated it. He encouraged them, he supported them, he empathized with them, but he also pushed them. And these people he focused on succeeded. It's a TV show, so obviously they were focusing on the people in the family that were excelling because it was a good story. But as I watched the show, it gave me pause. Because this man was so focused on being there for his children and his wife, and he was always trying to be better for his family. But above all, he was encouraging just about everyone who not only were succeeding, but when they did not succeed, because in one sequence they showed on the show, someone didn't do well, and the entire family just loved them through the mishap and the not winning. And as I watched it, I was like, whew, that is sort of the opposite of a narcissistic family system. But it made me realize that people often get to be excellent by very different pathways. So once we see people who are at the top of the game, they're just excellent. I guess the big question is, what are the differences and what got them there? I kind of thought of it as a 2x2 grid. Think along the top as you have a healthy empathic family or you have an invalidating toxic family. Along the side, think of it as a person who pushes themselves and excels, and then the other one is doesn't push themselves and struggle. So 4 little boxes. For this video, we're going to focus on the ones who succeed, whether they come from a supportive family or an invalidating, undermining family. The folks who have supportive families but don't ever really succeed or make it at much of anything, have their own struggles, sometimes shame, but also likely are ultimately to find their stride and not allow what they do or how they perform to be who they are, and their family supports that, loves them unconditionally. While the ones who come from toxic families, systems, who don't try or don't excel or don't succeed, well, in some ways that's expected because that's what's projected on a person in that kind of family system. But here is where it gets interesting. So again, let's go back to the show I was watching. It was striking to me how much engagement and interest there was amongst the members of the healthier families they depicted on the show. This was a particularly dangerous sport, so there was concern for the safety of the family member who did the sport. But the family rallied, and the success of that family member at the sport was something that everybody in the family was uplifted by. Again, not at all what you would see in a toxic family. Many people who come from toxic, narcissistic families of origin are high achievers, work hard, have high aspirations, never quit. The drive to succeed for people from these kinds of families is all-possessing and often comes from a place of wanting to be seen, wanting to be loved, from families where you might be trying to prove them wrong about you, about how foolish or dumb or bad you are, but the carrot and the goalposts are always moved. The sad part of it is that these toxic family systems will communicate to you that you are not good enough, and you will internalize that. So high achievement and perfectionism become safety behaviors. You keep striving and striving to be seen, but frankly, nobody is noticing. And perhaps when they do notice you, they critique it, they mock it, they question you. The striving then becomes a survival behavior, a sort of permanent quest to be useful and lovable. This is in marked contrast to people who have an interest or a gift or an aspiration that they feel safe enough to share it with their family system. Their family system values them as people, so they hear it. But the key here is that the person in the healthy family system feels like they are enough. So their striving isn't about being loved or being seen or feeling safe. It's about the love or interest or engagement in the activity. And the soft place to land, no matter how it goes, is always there for them, whether they succeed brilliantly or just have a mediocre showing. If you have experienced narcissistic abuse, and while the impacts of this narcissistic abuse on achievement and your approach to work and perfection and all the rest of it, they're probably most profoundly shaped by childhood and family experiences, though can also be shaped by adult family or intimate partner narcissistic relationships. You'll understand this. The kind of achievement, striving, and flexibility we see in people from these two very different types of systems, toxic versus healthy, look different. The people who feel safe and loved and aren't working and striving and excelling just to be loved, there's often more joy, as well as more of a capacity to have balance, to have passion for whatever the endeavor is, whether it's athletic or creative or academic or business or anything, but also create time and space for other things in their life, relationships, other activities, and also be willing to quit when it's time to quit. The folks whose drive and achievement orientation were planted and evolved as a response to an unsafe family system, so that work ethic and achievement striving were actually about earning love, being seen, proving people wrong about them, wanting to get to be valued as a person, well, then that balance is nowhere to be found. People from these kinds of toxic systems are folks who work relentlessly. Balance almost feels scary, as though if this group lightens up on the work, that they would face possible criticism for not working hard enough, or heaven forbid would fail, and then that would be their fault. So balance for a person from a toxic family system, to try to have that sense of balance, can almost leave them feeling like they're out of control. Only the work would matter. Listen, I work too much and I have no balance in my life. It's a problem. So the show actually made me think about that. Some of it goes to fears in me around not having enough resources, not having enough money has put me at risk throughout my life. So if I work less, I worry about going right back to zero. But it's deeper, and I see this echoed in people I talk to every day. We never rest on our laurels and say, I did good. We look at what we did, and the first thing we wonder is, what did I do wrong? Not what could we do better. What did we do wrong? What did we miss? And if I stop doing what I do, will everyone just disappear and forget about me? It's that existential. When you go through harmful relationships, finding the mistakes, the things you didn't get just right, even though you crushed it, that's a safety behavior. The not stopping the constant working because of irrational fears of being forgotten, that's a distortion, but it feels true. The impossible goal of getting it all right and maybe finally feeling completely safe is always dangling there, but we can only get there if we work hard enough. But perfection isn't a thing, and as a result, not only do survivors of narcissistic relationships and families have to grapple with the exhaustion of the chronic grief that's raised by these relationships, but the exhaustion of working all the time in a grail quest for something that's never going to come. They're never really going to notice you, and if they do, it's often to criticize you. Working hard, working all the time, a loss of balance, these are all forms of numbing and dissociation. In fact, it is almost a socially rewarded and sanctioned form of dissociation, but it's something more. To work like this is sometimes a way to try and get that thing we always wanted, to be seen, to be loved, to be attuned to, but in a less vulnerable way, because we couldn't do it by making our needs known emotionally, but instead doing it by striving and striving and striving and perhaps sometimes achieving. It's a bad transaction. Working hard is really not meant to be a pathway to being loved. And yet, in the desperate quest of the narcissistic family system or relationship, it's something that at least may give us money or social recognition that could just be a way to be seen. But none of this is the same as what happens in a healthy system, where you are valued for you, for your aspirations, whether they make money or get recognition or not. They're valued simply because they're a part of you. And so balance naturally comes from that. The achievement and the striving and the work, when it comes from that healthier place, they aren't numbing or a way to get love without feeling, but instead by doing. However, in the perilous landscape of the narcissistic relationship, we are doing anything and everything we can just to get a basic sense of safety and empathy and love. And since you won't be seen for just being you, which is what would happen, for example, in a healthy family system, you feel like you always have to earn it, which is often a driver for the high achievement drive of many survivors in narcissistic relationships. So you're succeeding and succeeding, but yet you have this hollow feeling in you all the time that you're never doing enough, and you rarely revel in your accomplishments, waiting for someone to hit you with something like, well, aren't you being uppity? Or just waiting for someone to just cut you down. And you keep looking for the one thing you did wrong in the midst of the dozens of things you did right. And more importantly, that you're you. It doesn't matter, right, wrong, good, or bad. The success of a survivor has a different feel. It may be astonishing, but it feels different than it would have than if it had happened in a healthier and in a safer space. So yeah, that success for somebody who comes from a toxic family system is hard won. And while the success is the success, and oftentimes that's all we look at, is just the win. We don't always look at how the sausage was made, everything that came up to that point. We don't look at the toll. And we also don't look at the unwillingness to embrace balance, which is so essential, but it often is non-existent for people who grew up in narcissistic relationships and became very successful themselves, because there's always that fear that the minute I let up on the throttle and have some balance, this whole plane's going to crash. I hope that's helpful, and thanks again.